I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
The seat taken.
Hey, Kiernan.
Hello, Ryan.
How are you?
You know, I've been thinking a lot about how Southwest has changed that policy, that it's not about the lining up anymore. Because first of all, I liked that system. I liked that system.
How many times did you fly Southwest?
Oh, I've flown Southwest plenty of times. Thank you. When you're going out to the National Park, Southwest, a fine airline. And what I liked about it was it felt kind of meritocratic, you know? And I want to say, especially because I know you're going to rag on me a lot because today's topic is the Hamptons. I want to say I believe in people who kind of pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. And with Southwest, you used to be able to set an alarm middle of the night, right when it opens up to get your place in line. You go on and you get your place in line in the lineup, and then you're rewarded with a great seat. You're not these lazy people.
Is it virtual?
Yeah, it was virtual towards the end.
Oh, I thought it was like
existed.
A Greyhound sort of thing.
No. It's not a lineup at the airport. Yeah. You would get your seating group based on when you went on and checked in. And so you were rewarded with checking in 24 hours before the flight.
Well, I'm sad that I didn't get to experience that. It sounds exciting.
Well, and I'll tell you,
Games of flight.
It is very Hunger Games, which I take it as why they did away with it. However, I will also say I think that it directly affects us here on Out of Office, a travel podcast, because this seat taken, I mean, that must have been said on thousands of Southwest flights, this seat taken, because you could pick your seat.
Oh, wait, so it wasn't that you picked your seat when you checked in, you picked that was like your number in line?
That was where you
like
lined
a deli,
up.
Like a deli meat counter kind of
like
situation?
a deli meat counter. Exactly. In fact, for a short period of time, their tagline was Southwest Airlines, like a deli meat counter.
That is, you know, I'm used to that. I'm a New Yorker sometimes, so I'm used to the deli meat counter. Yeah.
Well, anyway, this seat taken, I just pray that others are not going to follow in their footsteps, so that this seat taken doesn't become some sort of relic of the past. We need, what are they called now? Gen Alpha. We need these people to want to listen to us. They're not even going to know what this seat taken means.
I think our audience is pretty far away from Gen Alpha.
Listen, I'm a cool dude. All right.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we are like the young folks that our audience listen to. That's
there are plenty of young and good-looking and often rich folks in the place that we're going to talk about today, Ryan. Today, we are going to talk about that gated, beautiful enclave out at the tip of Long Island. When people tell you they're spending the summer out in Long Island, you know that what they mean is the Hamptons.
I mean, maybe people you know.
You just tried to do a New York accent. You know, these people walked by. Well, their cars drove by you. Yes.
Yeah. No, this. I'm excited to hear about the Hamptons. You know, I know about it from the movies. You know, and
what movies? Weekend at Bernie's. That took place in the Hamptons. That's true.
Did it really?
That's for funny. All our Gen Alpha folks. They love the Weekend at Bernie's references.
Yeah, maybe not the movies. You know, isn't it the Great Gatsby set in Long Island, the Hamptons?
Yeah, sure. The fictional town of I believe West Egg is the name of it. Yeah, so we're gonna dig into the Hamptons. Got a lot of opinions on the Hamptons. I've got my own personal story why I've spent a fair amount of time there, and I'm interested to hear about your experiences or your take. I mean, certainly you knew a lot of people who would go out to the Hamptons.
I know a lot of people that go to the Hamptons. It's true.
But before we dig too far in on that, Ryan, I did want to just give a quick check for Judy. Do the weekly Judy alert. Where are you right now?
I'm in beautiful Quito, Ecuador. It is not a sunny day. It's a little bit overcast here in Quito, but not so bad. And I'm heading to Bogota soon. So Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, it's so Judy, you can well, I mean
Sort of rest
Ecuador.
easy.
Yeah, I don't know. I would give it we might need a rating scale for the Judy alert where I
He
declare it
doesn't
like
keep up on international news.
it's it's like a 5. Yeah, but I don't know. Ecuador has been pretty in the news lately. Yeah.
Yeah.
When's your flight out of Quito? Soon?
Tomorrow afternoon. So I'm
Okay,
going to
cool.
make
Well,
it. Yeah.
keep your flak jacket on until then. Now, Ryan, of course, there is also some other news out there.
Yeah.
Brewing.
Well, Kiernan, I wanted to ask you, your hands have ink on them. What is that all about?
Well, I've been so busy down at the printing press. I've been, as everybody knows, from our recent episode, of course, my book, Secret Boston, an unusual guide, is finally out on shelves. It launched out on August 13th. I know I've gotten a bunch of outreach from people who put it in on Amazon and on bookshop.org to get they wanted it right away. And I also got my complimentary box that showed up. I get 20 copies, and I'll tell you
Ooh.
something that was so cool. Jonglei Publishing, my publisher, included in there a bunch of other secret guides to
Oh,
U.S. destinations.
that's awesome.
So now I've got Los Angeles, New Orleans, and I'll plug. They also, same day that mine came out, they put out a secret Louisiana that looks very, very cool.
That is very cool. Yeah. And one of those books is mine. I hope.
You're gonna have to purchase the book. I don't know what you're talking about. I already put an You're in the acknowledgments, Ryan. I mean, I can't just give them away. I mean,
Well,
I did get 20.
Gonna...
I could give them away. I was trying to figure out actually how to divide up the 20. I want 5 for posterity. I'm going to keep 5.
I think the next 2 reviews on iTunes that are 5 stars and mention your book, you should send them a free copy.
Ooh, as long as they mention the book. But
they have to mention the book.
They got to mention the book. And one other thing I'll ask is, it would be great if you could give it a good review on like an Amazon or a bookshop.org, and then I'll send you a free one. You don't have to order it. Just give it a good review.
All right. So, folks, the next 2 reviews on the old iTunes, leave 5 stars and mention Kiernan's new book, Secret Boston, an unusual.
Oh, but not our troll, Cornhusker 55.
No.
Cornhusker 55. Don't try to get in there and say,
if he wants to leave a 5-star review, that's great. That'll be great he's like one of our only 1 stars.
He's gonna, Cornhusker 55. He's gonna get in there. He's gonna put 5 stars. Then he's gonna put, oh, what a woke book, Secret Boston, filled with woke secret hatred. It is a
little woke, Kiernan. I mean, there's some, you talk about the Kennedys.
There's Kennedy stuff in there. There's vegetarian food stuff in there. There's infrastructure, a lot of infrastructure. The libs, we love actually passing the bills that the conservatives couldn't to get infrastructure done.
Yeah, not enough Mitt Romney. Was one of my thoughts.
Well, you and I, of course, Romney Democrats, and there's never enough Mitt Romney. Actually, that's interesting. I do get to add places for future editions. And I wonder if there's any sign of Romney from his years as governor that I could get in the book.
I mean, just besides the fact everybody had health care like a decade before.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, why isn't there a monument to that? There's a monument to the creation of ether. Anesthesia. No, that's true. That's in the book.
I know. We talk about it. There's multiple.
That's true. There's multiple ether.
There's a donkey. There's literally a donkey that has nothing to do with Boston.
Yeah. That's right. And an elephant standing in opposition to the donkey. Mitt Romney. I mean, obviously he would have a portrait in the State House, I'm sure.
We should fundraise for a Romney statue.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I've recently been wondering whether I shouldn't advocate for a statue that I want to see in Boston. And it ties to being a father, which is I want Boston to acknowledge that we are the birthplace of Richard Scarry, the creator of Busytown.
What? I didn't know that. That's
he was born in Boston. He moved to Switzerland later in life and did a lot of his work overseas, but he was born here.
Boston, Switzerland.
Well, I was just thinking, wouldn't it be cool to have a big lowly worm statue somewhere in Boston?
It to me is crazy that Richard Scarry, who is generationally famous, would not have a
Thank you
statue.
for saying that. I completely agree. This might be a cause that I actually
Yeah.
take up. I really want this.
Yeah, you got my support. I'll send $10 to that GoFundMe.
Statues are very expensive.
Yeah.
So we might need a little bit more. I'm gonna have to sell a lot of Secret Boston books to fund a lowly worm statue.
Well, Kiernan, before we jump in, before we slide into the Hamptons, you don't jump in.
Well, I always say slip in, but you always say slide.
We should give a shout out to some of the 5-star reviews that we've gotten in the last couple weeks on the old Apple Podcast.
Absolutely, iTunes, Apple Podcasts. Again, you're sounding young and fresh. The first one is a 5-star review left by user that's GDRKBGT, and subject line says it all. Wow, what a podcast. And it's actually quite long, but what I want to call out specifically was this said that they went back and listened to all 181 previous episodes.
That's amazing.
Amazing. And
that's like up there with our mothers. I think that is.
And listen, that means that this user went through the 2 episodes where we analyzed
Broadway tickets,
where we analyzed the pictures inside passports.
Bonus Mark Adams. I mean, this
okay. Bonus Mark Adams. I will defend. I absolutely defend. And I'll tell you what I would love to hear from this person if they're listening. I'd love for you to shoot us an email at outofofficepod@gmail.com. Let us know if you like the Christmas spectaculars, because I personally am a big fan of doing those episodes, and I've always wondered whether the audience actually likes them.
Well, they didn't say they listened to 178, so I get the feeling they listened to those Christmas episodes.
Praise the Rick Steves episode, fantastic. And now, granted, did say I'm honestly not a fan. But I listened to the whole 35-minute interview. I mean, it is now my intent that I need this email address from so that we can talk about what about the Rick Steves approach she's not feeling, because it's important for me to convert her. Says that, and I'm assuming her. I don't know. There's something in the tone that's so friendly. And I also now a national parks enthusiast, and is claiming that the podcast made her so. So we're thrilled to have you aboard, and thank you for the review.
Yeah, great review. Thanks so much. And she says we should go to Brazil, and I'm planning to go next year. So we'll definitely keep folks updated on that. And then we have a review from M. Smith Tahoe, who I imagine lives in Tahoe. Very funny subject line here. Not a brutal review.
Oh, that's a reference to Cornhusker 55, who always titles his very mean reviews brutal.
Yeah, and they say that they usually hate banter on podcasts, but except for this one, which is a pretty high praise.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
You know why, Ryan? It's because we actually like each other.
Well, that's there's still a debate amongst the fans, but yeah.
Which, by the way, when we launch the Patreon, whenever that is in our future, I am determined that the Patreon exclusive episodes are going to be a sub show that is called "Does Ryan Like Kiernan?" which is one of the famously something that. Did we get that in the email, or was that a review?
That was a review. That was a review. Yeah.
Does Ryan like Kiernan? I want to know. Are they taking it for granted that Kiernan likes Ryan?
I think so.
I do like you, Ryan. I do like you.
I like you too. But I do also like the mystery that we give folks. So thank you, M. Smith Tahoe, for that lovely review, and I'm so glad that you are coming back after still listening to us for over a year. We've been doing this for a while, so appreciate it.
Well, Ryan, I think with that, it's time to put on your finest beach gear. Hopefully you got it on Fifth Avenue, because you got to look pretty spiffy when you go to the Hamptons.
Let's jump on that jitney.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
All right, Ryan. Well, I want to begin by asking, and I have no idea. How long did you live in New York for? A long time.
I lived in New York for like 22 years.
So I'm assuming at some point you found yourself out in the Hamptons.
One time, and I think
is that real? It was only the once.
The once that we were there together.
We were, yeah. We were there for a wedding together.
Fancy wedding.
It was a fancy. Well, obviously, it's built in there. Oh,
It was in the Hamptons,
so you actually. This is going to be a lot of new information for you on today's episode.
Yeah, this is all new to me. I'm excited. I think the wedding was in East Hampton. Or it might have been in another one. There's a lot in the Hamptons.
I'm gonna explain the very confusing geography of the Hamptons and the end of Long Island. And I'm actually surprised because you run with a pretty high rolling crowd there in New York. At least some of your friends. But I guess they were more of like a Fire Island crowd than a Hamptons crowd. Yeah, makes sense.
Yes.
Been to Fire Island much?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We can put it there as a family show. Listen, now I have been, so I lived in New York City for 8 years, and I was very fortunate that one of my very best friends, his family had what I have to call just an absolutely beautiful house out in the Hamptons. And there was a separate kind of apartment above the garage. And it was sort of an open invitation to his friends. When you want to get out of the city during the summer, just let us know and come on out of New York City, and you got a place to stay. And my college friends and I took great advantage of that. And in fact, this episode was inspired by the fact that I just went for a visit down to that family. And you know what? I was still relegated to the apartment. I didn't get to stay in the big house.
Well, I've heard for years about these travels, so I'm excited to dive in and learn more about it.
Yeah. So what are the Hamptons? I think this is an important thing. I think you do hear it on pop culture and Sex and the City and all these like New York City shows. And what the Hamptons are it's a description of the beach area that is at the tip of Long Island. So basically, if you leave New York City, get on the Long Island Expressway and drive 2.5 hours east, you will be in the Hamptons. And there is what they call the North Fork and the South Fork. And that's because when you get further out onto Long Island, it forks both to the north and to the south. The North Fork is like its own thing. We could do a separate episode on that called the North Fork. There's tons and tons of breweries and vineyards up there. It's it's less sceney than the South Fork, which is the Hamptons itself.
And one of them you use for the salad, and one you use for the main course.
Oh God! I mean, this here we were just praised for our banter, and then you come in there with that sort of joke that if I said it, you'd throw the mic across.
Oh,
the room.
Come on! A silverware joke in the Hamptons episode, I think very appropriate.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So the Hamptons themselves are basically Southampton and East Hampton. Okay, those are like the two big names for this area in the South Fork. But alongside, making up Southampton and East Hampton, are all these little villages and hamlets. And I almost feel like you get a key insight into what it's like to be in the Hamptons and the fact that they call them villages and hamlets. And because I have often felt that when you get out there, it really is like a lot of insanely wealthy people like playing house a little bit. And just calling them hamlets and villages, it like sounds cutesy and quaint, but it's not that. I mean, it's very it's pleasurable, it's beautiful, but it's also like high rolling and really expensive. And there's places to see and be seen, and it is a scene baby out in Southampton and East Hampton. But I just want to let you know, if you're looking into going and visit the Hamptons, you may come across many names of these villages and hamlets. Particularly, I feel like the ones that you hear the most about. You got Watermill, Bridgehampton, another name Hampton to confuse you even more, Amagansett, and then the one that I suspect our younger listeners will hear about the most, and which I want to give a little more context on, is Montauk.
I didn't know that Montauk was a Hampton.
Well, it's not that they are See, now even using phrases like that, Ryan, I'm nervous about your ability to visit the Hamptons by describing Montauk as a Hampton.
I wouldn't want to commit any faux pas. So yeah,
you wouldn't want to commit any faux pas. Now, when we were getting into the segment, Ryan, you mentioned the Jitney. Now, I'm a little nervous about. Now, how do you know about the Jitney if you've only been out that one time? What do you know about it?
I know that it's like a fancy, I don't know. Am I allowed to call it a bus or is it a carriage? It's a fancy. It looks like a bus.
Obviously, they didn't want to call it a bus, so they brand it as the Jitney.
Yeah.
And these are, as you say, they are nice, pretty well kept up buses that are going back and forth on the Long Island Expressway all year long, but especially in the summer.
And they serve like prosecco, and it's that kind of.
I think
vibe.
that you're thinking more of the luxury liner than the Jitney. The Jitney is kind of the basic bus that runs back and forth. It's not terribly expensive, and if you're in New York City and you're looking to take a beach weekend out, whether just because you're on vacation in New York and you want to see what's outside the city, or if you're a resident there, there's tons of pickup points from that the Hamptons Jitney does in New York City on its way out to the Hamptons. And so I've spent many a Friday hour and a Sunday hour sitting in horrible traffic on the Hampton Jitney. But, it's an easy way to go out. Just pop those earphones in, put on a tune, and close your eyes until they ring the bell that you've arrived at a Hampton.
A Hampton. And then the Hampton luxury liner, that's a nicer version of the Jitney?
So the luxury liner is sort of like that. This is where the super wealthy take helicopters.
They take helicopters,
But the tier below that is the luxury liner, which is just a lot more leg room, more amenities, and I think they serve snacks on it. I mean, it's almost like the equivalent of an airline on the ground. But you know what? You still got to take the Long Island Expressway on the luxury liner.
One of my favorite New York Times articles ever was the Hamptons war about the helicopters, and I'll find the link to it.
Well, there are almost every year there's a war about something out in the Hamptons, and the reason is, and you feel this tension when you're out there, and I do want to call it out, is that the Hamptons it was traditionally a rural place, a place where there was fishermen and farmers. And, over time, it has become such a scene. And now it's not just a scene, but it is so ultra wealthy and competitive that if you're one of these older families whose heritage is in the Hamptons, that you grew up in Amagansett, or Watermill was where you had your family home. I mean, hopefully you didn't sell that family home, because that land and that home are very valuable these days. But two, it's turning into a place that maybe you can't afford to stay. And I do feel for that. And I will say, as a pretty average guy, I am a bit self-conscious when I leave my friend's house when I'm out there, because I feel like, I'm wearing my LL Bean, I'm driving my Toyota. I mean, I'm not looking like I belong everywhere.
Well, it's funny. There's a bad movie that came out last year starring Jennifer Lawrence called No Hard Feelings. And it's about a woman who is from one of these families and the tension. And Matthew Broderick has a great performance as a rich Hamptons dad. But it's a bad movie.
Very
overall.
Compelling. Oh, it's a bad movie.
It's not a good movie, no.
And actually, one of the it brings me into Montauk, because one of the places that has been realizing some of these tensions between locals and those who are coming in is in Montauk. There's an area called Ditch Plains Beach, which is a very lovely beach, and Montauk is all the way out at the end of Long Island. And it is notable, by the way, when we were talking about how to get out there, the traffic during the summers is just horrendous. So if you can go on off hours, if you can go, before noon on Friday and get back on Monday, that's a better way to visit the Hamptons, because everybody takes half a day on Fridays during the summer. They jet out there. and the Long Island Expressway gets totally crowded. And then as you get further and further into the Hamptons, it comes down to a single road. It's almost like if you know Cape Cod, it goes all the way down to that single road going over to a bridge, which creates a lot of congestion. Similarly, as you pass from Watermill into Southampton, you're going into Southampton, it comes down to one lane and the traffic gets brutal. And so if you're going to Montauk, you're talking about an additional hour
Oof.
on a pretty congested road. But Montauk is a place that is still in transition from, it feels like more of a local place than a lot of than East Hampton, than Southampton, because it retains some of that original character of kind of a beach town for surfers and locals. But there have recently been some new construction on some of these beaches that the locals feel like, well, it's kind of inevitable that Montauk is going to go the way of the other Hamptons.
And that's exactly where the movie takes place. So that's so funny.
Oh, I'll note there that if you are going, there's a boutique hipster hotel out there that has kind of fun nightlife, and it's called the Surf Lodge. And the Surf Lodge was kind of the first hotel out there that felt kind of like Brooklyn, making its way out to Long Island, and it's still there, the Surf Lodge, and is sure, it's certainly a place that you'd probably enjoy yourself if you go out to Montauk, if you need a break from the beach.
And are
But
these like walkable, or are these like everybody drives everywhere?
no, these are like full little towns. I mean, so
Okay.
you're not easily walking from one to the next. I mean, you're driving, depending on the traffic, but you're driving several miles between them. They're not
Gotcha.
like adjacent neighborhoods. They're not neighborhoods. They're more
Well, no,
like
I mean,
towns.
like, is Montauk itself like a walkable place, or do people you
Oh,
have to drive
Montauk
around?
is quite walkable. Yeah. I mean, again, like it's not a tiny, it's not tiny. I think you probably do want your car with you, but
Yeah.
it's, you can get around and you can get to the major places. And also, like, unlike a lot of, I mean, these aren't off the beaten path places. So you can certainly take the Jitney out and then use Uber to get
Yeah. So
everywhere.
you can Uber around.
Totally, totally. But you're going to pay a lot because that Uber is going to be sitting in a lot of traffic. I mean, I really want you to understand how bad the traffic is.
Sounds
It's
great.
real. Now, I want to mention, I'm gonna talk about like the standout beach in the Hamptons, but I also want to point out a couple of really great cultural things that there are to do in the Hamptons, because these are really worthy of your time if you're taking a break and visiting the Hamptons. And one of them is out in Montauk, and it's this historic lighthouse that's called the Montauk Point Lighthouse. And you'll love this because we love presidential history, Ryan. This Montauk Lighthouse was actually commissioned by the first president, George Washington, in 1792.
Wow, that's incredible.
And it's considered one of the first real public works projects that they put in place. Of course, ships and shipping lanes were very important to the emerging nation to get our goods from Europe. And indeed, the building lighthouses was a major push. Anyone who likes Hamilton knows, famously in that musical, credited as the founder of the Coast Guard, because setting the coast up with infrastructure was a major point of pride for this nation that was trying to prove itself on the world stage. And so you can visit the site of it at the Montauk Point Lighthouse, which is overseen by the Montauk Historical Society. And each of these little towns has a historical society. And there are many little museums, too, that can teach you about the history of the specific places, that doesn't concentrate on the luxury brands or the Manhattan art galleries that have opened outposts out in the Hamptons. So you can get more of a feel of like the community of these towns. And I'd really encourage you to do that if you have the time.
I do love an historic lighthouse.
I will say there's another thing about the lighthouse that actually I talk about these in Secret Boston with our own lighthouse out in Boston Harbor. Have you ever heard of something called a Fresnel lens?
I don't think so.
So Fresnel's lenses are named after a French physicist whose last name was Fresnel. And they are what allows the light to be concentrated into a beam that can be seen way, way out at sea. And so at this historic Montauk Point Lighthouse, they had actually removed the Fresnel's lens that concentrated the light. and it pissed off locals because they were saying, well, we've got a lighthouse here, and they're turning on this little cheap LED, and like my flashlight is brighter, and like the lights on the base of the thing are brighter than the actual lighthouse. And so just in the past couple of years, they reinstalled one of the historic Fresnel's lenses, which are basically like this beautiful curved glass. It's really almost like a sculpture itself. And the physics is such that the light becomes concentrated and shoots out to sea for miles and miles.
That sounds beautiful.
Yeah, it's really cool. And if you get to go to any of these old historic lighthouses, whether in Boston or Montauk, you can see one up close. Now, Ryan, certainly if you visit the Hamptons, you got to make time to go to the beach. I like to think that the beaches out there are a place where all the competitive nature of showing off among the hyper wealthy kind of takes a back seat, because on the beach you all got beach chairs, you got your flip flops on, and there are some wonderful beaches to explore out there. And in Southampton, there's a beach called Cooper's Beach, and Cooper's Beach is regularly listed among the top 10 beaches in the United States, which I think really says something when you think we've got all of California, we've got all of Florida, and we have so much coastline, but Cooper's Beach is just this beautiful, fine white sand. It's super soft on your feet. They get these big, exciting waves that come in, so it's fun to play in the water, and you get a lot of wind off the water because you're right on the tip of the ocean. So it's a really great and fun beach to explore.
That sounds great. I love East Coast beaches.
And I will just say, if you are driving there, do know that there is a fairly substantial parking fee of about $40. So if you're staying at a hotel and you can stay parked there and just kind of Uber back and forth, you're probably going to get some sand in the trunk of that car. So you're going to want to apologize. But I would recommend it. It's a pretty expensive park.
Yeah, that is a bit, and then you're gonna be in traffic anyway. You might as well take the Uber.
Yeah. The another cultural site that I wanted to talk about, and I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this museum. I don't think it's as well known as it really should be. It's also in Southampton, and it's called the Parrish Art Museum, Parrish. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
So it's actually the main drag that gets you deeper into the Hamptons that everyone drives by goes right by this open meadow where there's this low slung single story long building with this kind of unassuming corrugated roof, and it looks very mysterious and interesting because in this place where real estate is at a premium, it's got this large plot of land, and it is an art museum, and it actually goes all the way back to 1898. It was originally founded by someone whose last name was Parrish, Samuel Longstreth Parrish, and he basically loved Italian Renaissance paintings and collected them and brought them out and founded an art museum out in Southampton.
That's
And
a very Hampton thing to do.
it's a very, but at that time,
Yeah.
it wasn't this rich enclave. So it's so interesting that they've ended up with this wonderful cultural institution that has a really great collection. And it moved into this building, particularly in 2012.
No, this looks super cool. I would take a trip out just to check this museum out.
It's nice. I think like if you're a little overwhelmed by the flashy mansions and the real estate and like the scene, it's a very cool place to take time to get out of the sun for a little bit and check it out. It's got a fun mix of it's one of these like encyclopedia. Its collection aims to be encyclopedic, so it has representations of lots of different types of art. Personally, I've always liked their modern art the best, and so they have. Especially, I've noticed they tend to have a lot of cool light installations, and sometimes on that low building that's right on this main drag that everyone is slowly going by in traffic, they will actually put artwork up on the side. They'll illuminate it up on the side of the museum, so everybody gets to enjoy it.
Oh, that's very cool. No, this is a find for sure.
And you'll also be interested. They do like to prioritize artists from the Long Island area, but they're also very intent on celebrating Latin American artists. And so they have a relationship with this organization called Organización Latinoamericana, and it is meant to promote the welfare of Latino and Hispanic Long Islanders. So, and in fact, their recently named director, just in the past couple years, is of Mexican descent, and so it's just an interesting cultural kind of island among all these great beaches and mansions.
Yeah, no, and it's cool that they're engaging like folks in the broader Long Island community.
And I'll say to finish up on the museum, they have a fantastic collection of an artist named Fairfield Porter, who I did not know until I went, but I actually really loved his style, which he described as concrete in detail and abstract as a whole. And so he is a realist, and he paints in a really lovely palette these realistic situations and people, but they're not super detailed. And he died in 1975, and then the Parrish Art Museum received his collections, and so they always have those up in the permanent collection, and that's probably my favorite thing to like go and explore that I know is going to be there.
Now, I wonder this next thing you're going to talk about. Do they have any of Long Island's own Jackson Pollock in the museum?
Interesting you asked that. So, let's see. When I have visited, I have not seen any Pollocks, but they do have a lot of rotating art. So that's not to say that they don't have Pollocks. But there is another place that I would guide you for Jackson Pollock, but not the way you think you're going to see Jackson Pollock. So, as you described, Jackson Pollock famously lived and died on Long Island. And my last two sites that are on the cultural side of the Hamptons have to do with that. There is a house that you can visit that's called the Pollock-Krasner House. And this is where Jackson Pollock and his artist wife, Lee Krasner, who was an impressionist, this is where the two of them lived and worked, beginning in 1945 straight through to Pollock's death, which was in 1956.
Gosh, I
And
cannot believe that Pollock's been dead that long. He just seems like such a vital character.
yeah, I totally get what you mean there. And I will say that this historic house totally meets my standards of if I put you in a blindfold and I dropped you in, what are you going to see there? Because a Pollock is recognizable as a
Yeah.
Pollock.
There's just
And
a lot of paint splatters
well,
around me.
that's what's so interesting about it. So there's the main house, which is this really unassuming house that I'm just like amazed they had the foresight to protect. But then there's a barn behind it, which is what he used as his studio. And Pollock's brother had given him these like big square game boards. They're like this baseball game, and they have a couple of them preserved there. And he had put them down across the floor when he wasn't producing his artwork. Okay. And when he died, famously in a car crash, he was drunk. Um, Krasner started to use the studio as hers. But then when archivists and the foundation went in to potentially open up this house again, they took up these game boards that were laid all over the floor of the barn, and everything that was there were the remains of Jackson Pollock's spatters. So they almost look like its own artwork. I'll put some photos on the Instagram at OOO podcast on Instagram. And it's amazing because it looks like a hidden Pollock that is this giant barn floor that you can only see if you make a reservation to go visit this house. It's amazing.
That is so cool. And reminds me that I haven't seen the movie with Ed Harris since I was probably in high school.
Mm.
And, it's all filmed around there, and then it shows him working in the barn and everything. So that would be great to revisit, before going to see this house.
Yeah. And it is well worth it. I mean, really, take the time to go. You learn a lot about their relationship. You learn a lot about their different art processes, and then you kind of get to cap it off with this super interesting, can't see it anywhere else barn that was actually Pollock's workspace. And the floor looks like a Pollock. That's what I can't get over enough. Like, it looks like it should be taken up and put in MoMA.
No, that's awesome. Let's hope they leave it there, so folks can go enjoy it.
Well, speaking of leaving it there,
Yeah.
the last place in the Hamptons that I want to talk about is where Pollock's grave is, which is called Green River Cemetery. And it actually became kind of like a hotbed for artists to get buried. I didn't know that the Hamptons were traditionally like this sanctuary for artists who kind of wanted to be back and forth between urban New York and rural Long
it was
Island.
like the Bushwick of its day.
I mean, I get it. This was pre-Jitney.
Yeah.
And so once Pollock's grave was put there, and eventually Krasner's, a bunch of other artists and writers got buried in this Green River Cemetery, and it actually comes full circle back to this locals versus carpetbaggers, because the locals were kind of pissed that this like family cemetery that the community had been burying their people in for centuries was suddenly being taken over by famous artists and writers. But you can go there and you can very much tell the artists and writers' gravestones, because people come and they leave things, but also the gravestones themselves are really works of art. So
is Pollock's what you would imagine, or is it
no, it's just kind of a giant boulder, but it's big. I mean, you're gonna know he's there. And
people splash,
I have not seen splashes on it, but you gotta think somebody does.
Somebody should. I mean, no, they shouldn't, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So you can see Elaine de Kooning there, Frank O'Hara, and of course Pollock and Krasner themselves. So worth your time if you want to get off the beach. And Ryan, that's a very quick snapshot at the Hamptons. So if you're making your way out there, if you're unfamiliar with it, I hope I've equipped you. I don't know that I gave you enough etiquette lessons to mingle among the denizens of the Hamptons, but I think I gave you enough that you could have a good long weekend.
Yeah, just study up on which fork to use. But Kiernan, with that, I think it's time for the last stop.
Can't believe you made a callback to that. The last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right, Ryan. Well, we're here in the last stop. This is the last segment of the show. It's the final segment of the show. It's my favorite segment. It's your favorite segment. It's popularly known as the people segment. And boy, when you're talking about the Hamptons, you got to return to our democratic roots here in the people segment. And that's because it's where you and I each share one thing. It could be anything. It could be a souvenir. It could be a memory. It could be a dream. It could be a plan for a trip we've taken, or it could be a trip that got something went wrong and we didn't take it, but we learned something. But it must meet one criterion. It must inspire the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. So, Ryan, I'm going to ask you, as I ask you every week, do you have a last stop this week?
I do, Kiernan, and going about as far away as from the Hamptons as I can imagine. I was in Guayaquil, Ecuador.
Oh, Lordy. That's over. Were you okay? You shouldn't be going to Guayaquil.
It's totally fine. Things are calmed down.
There's a lot of drug violence in Guayaquil, Ryan.
Not right now.
Judy, cover your ears. That's for Ryan's mom. Cover your ears. Ryan was not in Guayaquil.
There were plenty. The tourists have returned. Folks are going back to the Galapagos. Guayaquil is emerging from a dark period. We did an episode, and I was there for a few days earlier in the year, and I didn't get to visit the National Cacao Museum. And I've been to cacao museums in Latin America, and they're usually just sort of like excuses to sell you, various kinds of chocolate. But this was a super legit museum. It opened during the pandemic in this gorgeous Italian-style mansion that's 100 years old. That was actually owned by one of the great cacao families of Ecuador. Cacao is a major cash crop for Ecuador. And it actually puts cacao in like a really interesting historical and cultural context that was sort of new to me. Talks about the early trading routes. Cacao's been a part of Ecuadorian culture for over 4,000 years. And it was just a very cool museum. We had a guide who spoke excellent English. She was super cool. And, walked us through the various rooms that sort of start historically, and then they go into sort of the more modern cacao, and then a bunch of really funny examples of where Ecuadorian chocolate has been used. It's everywhere from Hershey's. I actually sent you a chocolate bar I thought reminded me of very Edward Gorey-esque.
I loved it. I loved it. We could put that on the Instagram too.
Yeah, and and it was, and again, in this like old house that is full of just gorgeous Italian marble that was built by this family. So it's half historic house, half cacao museum, and then at the end they do give you the opportunity to buy some cacao. It's a legit museum, so I thought it was very cool, and it would be a worthy addition to anyone's Guayaquil visit if you're on the way to the Galapagos. So I'll put a link to the Guayaquil episode in the show notes. And folks, check it out. And Kiernan, did you bring a last stop?
I did, Ryan. There's an awesome New York Times article that I just wanted to point out. It's very it's a very quirky story, but it involves Catholic saints, and it involves a melting pot mentality that I like to see stories of. So it's a story. I mean, this is one of these stories that, like, I don't know how you would know it unless you traveled there. It's about Palmero in Sicily. And it's about how there is apparently a large immigrant population of Hindu Tamils, largely from Sri Lanka. So, looking for work, looking to escape violence in Sri Lanka, a big population has moved to Sicily. And one of the great things about Hinduism is that there's a pantheon of gods, not like the staid Catholicism where, you and I would not even gods, they have the Trinity, but you're told it's one. It's all very confusing. And apparently the Hindu Tamils have adopted as their own the patron saint of Palmero, who's a saint that I was unfamiliar with up until this article. And her name is Saint Rosalina. And there's a big Rosalina festival, and they march a statue through the streets. And there's a cave that she apparently took sanctuary in when she escaped an arranged marriage. And the Tamil population have begun to worship Saint Rosalina. So this is we're a Big Tent podcast. This is a Big Tent worship, and the article has pictures of Hindu altars around town where you've got Ganesh and you've got Saint Rosalina. I love to see it. It kind of reminded me of, in Guatemala, Desmond. You remember Desmond?
Yes.
And so Saint Rosalina, I want to learn more about her. I'll report back about her on the podcast. And she's got a couple miracles to her name. And I just want to say, on behalf of the Catholics, we're happy to have the Sri Lankan Tamil worshipers in with us.
Yeah, no, I thought this was a super cute article, and great to see, how folks can integrate into society like Sicily, which is pretty old. So it's cool to see. And by the way, Kiernan, all saints have miracles. It's how they become saints.
Yeah, I know that, Ryan. But the people don't all know that. The people don't all know that.
What are we talking about next week, Kiernan?
We've got a great episode next week, which is an interview I'm going to have with the head of 21C Museum Hotels, which is a hotel chain that I've become absolutely obsessed with ever since we visited and stayed at one in Louisville. So you'll remember a unique concept of a hotel with a great restaurant and a pretty extensive modern art museum, all part of one facility. And I just think it's brilliant. We're going to tackle why others aren't doing this and where 21C's future lies.
Well, until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken. Ryan, which saint would you pitch to non-Catholics as the one they should adopt?
Sebastian.
Oh my God! People may not know Saint Sebastian. The gays have adopted
the gay
Saint
saint.
Sebastian. All right, we're gonna talk Catholic saints soon on the pod.
All right.